Hello, American Studies students. Today we'll be covering Week 1, Day 3, the Gilded Age and the gold and glitter of the Gilded Age. Alright, so the Industrial Revolution or the Gilded Age happening in the late 1800s. I just want to give you a reminder to be in GroupMe, check the QR code, make sure it should be on the PowerPoint, and make sure you're adding yourself so that you can get up-to-date information, know what you're missing, know what you need to do, that kind of stuff. All right, so what does Gilded Age mean? I'll give you a second to think about it, and then we will answer this question. What does the Gilded Age, what does gilded mean? So gilded, it means covered thinly with gold. So you have like this apple in the picture, a apple on the outside with a thin veil of gold. And then underneath that gold is wrought at the core. So this thin layer of shiny glitter, happiness, prosperity, and underneath really dark, bad things happening, a gilded age. Here is a video that describes why we call this the Gilded Age, a summary of what it's like. So you can find this link on the PowerPoint if you'd like to watch it. So you have this gold on top. This represents the rich, the wealthy, the industrial part of the Industrial Revolution, of the Gilded Age. This rich, glamorous skyscrapers and new industries, new technology. The rich were these business tycoons that monopolized the new technology. Things like steel, oil, railroads, banks were owned by the 1%. The things that really kept the city going and moving, hustling and bustling, was owned by a very small percentage. The top 1%, 4,000 families, held about half the country's wealth. So an absurd amount of wealth held by a very small amount of people. The rest of the country, the rest of the 11 million Americans, owned the other half. Why monopolies formed? You have new technology that led to rapid industrialization, new factories that needed cheap labor. You had transportation like the steam engine. You have electricity, oil used for heating and lighting, steel being used to build cities and skyscrapers and railroads. So all this new technology needed a lot of labor. So you have immigrants coming to this country from Europe and needing to work these new factory jobs, and this major advancement in technology leading to rapid industrialization in these factory jobs. You also have laissez-faire government policies, meaning that laissez-faire means hands-off. So the government is hands-off. It's not regulating industries. It's not regulating monopolies. It's not making sure we don't have monopolies like we have today. We don't have today. If you have a 96% holding of an industry, if you own all the oil, the government's going to break that up. You can't hold that much of a company because monopolies aren't great for society or the economy a lot of the time. So we don't allow monopolies today in the same way that they allowed it then. They had these hands-off, no regulations during this time, and that allowed these monopolies to be created. You had these people taking hold of entire industries, all of steel, all of oil, all of railroads, or a large percentage of them. So these few people holding so much of the wealth, holding so much of industry, holding so much of these essential products, allowed for robber barons, which we will talk about now. So robber barons come from medieval times, and in this cartoon by a muckraker, it's called History Repeats Itself, the robber barons of the Middle Ages and the robber barons of today. So in this corner you have a picture of robber barons, these lords that rule over, own land and rule over others, and serfs giving up their gold, giving up their riches, giving up their resources to the robber barons. And then today, the Gilded Age, you had the robber barons, the people that own the trusts, own the monopolies, taking taxes, wages, everything from the working class. So I want you to really look at this picture, think about why someone would draw this, what they're trying to say, what's going on in society that would cause someone to draw this and spread it for the rest of us to see. And look at the words within. I didn't cover everything, so really try to analyze this cartoon. All right, another cartoon drawn by a muckraker, created in 1889. You have all these monopolists, it says monopoly at the top of this store, walking in, steel, copper, Standard Oil, so all these known monopolies coming in and standing behind our legislature, our Congress, and really running the show. They're allowed to dictate our laws, allowed to dictate what's going on in government. And then over here you have the public store, the people's entrance is closed. So the people do not have a voice compared to the monopolists sitting behind. I want you to think why someone would draw this image, why they would choose the words they chose, and what they're trying to tell you about the Gilded Age. Okay, so who are these monopolists? Who are these men that are owning 50% of the country? So you have Andrew Carnegie, who, if you ever heard of Carnegie Hall, he's donated an extreme amount of money, millions of dollars, at the end of his life. He owned steel, Carnegie Steel, and he immigrated here as a Scottish immigrant, made strong and cheap steel, and that went to building the cities, building the roads of the industrial era. This is one of his mansions that shows his extreme wealth. He believed that the first 1/3 of your life you should become educated, the next 1/3 of your life you should make as much money as you can, and the last 1/3 of your life you should give it all away. This is exactly what he did. He gave away most of his money at the end of his life, and that's why Carnegie is a well-known name that you see on buildings today. Here's a picture of the inside of his mansion. As you can tell, I want you to look at this image and tell me what you can see. But a very, very nice dining room. But really try to think about what kind of wealth exists for this to be where he lived during the time. Another one of these extremely wealthy men was Vanderbilt. This is the Vanderbilt Mansion or Baltimore Estate in North Carolina. Again, look at this image and think about what you can tell by this mansion and then the living room as well. Vanderbilt controlled railroads and shipping, mostly in Northeast U.S. He had vertical integration, which means he owned almost all aspects of the industry, from the initial raw materials to putting it together and actual transportation. So he owned a lot of the industry, monopolized it, and Vanderbilt, again, is another name that still exists today and is associated with money because of the monopoly they held in transportation and railroads. J.P. Morgan is another one of these robber barons that bought Carnegie Steel, and then now it's General Electric. He also was a banker and financer. That's what his main, where his name comes from, is banking. He owned this, the J.P. Morgan private island home that sold for around $125 million, and again, extremely wealthy. He ended up loaning money to the government, bailing out the U.S. government during economic panics twice. So not once did he bail out the U.S. government during economic crisis, but twice. So a lot of money if the government's turning to him asking for money, a lot of money, and then of course a lot of power with it. Here's a picture of J.P. Morgan and the Monopoly Man. who is largely based off of J.P. Morgan. You can see the hat, the mustache, the cane. He was known for carrying a cane around and hitting his harassers and photographers to get them to back away with his cane. But an interesting man, owned a lot of money as a banker and then with steel, and had a lot of power and influence as well. You have the Rockefellers, which is another well-known name. A Rockefeller today is still one of the richest men in the world. Here is their mansion. They had both vertical and horizontal integration. He definitely was known for horizontal integration, where he would undercut his competitors' prices, and then once they went under, buy up their refineries. So he started gobbling up all of the oil refineries. He owned around 96% of oil at the peak of his monopoly. So he ended up making a lot of money. He was thought to be worth about $400 billion, 2% of the global wealth, at one point in his life. So if not the wealthiest man, one of the wealthiest men to ever exist. He believed in social Darwinism, which is this idea of survival of the fittest that justified the poor conditions for the poor and the great conditions for himself, saying that hard work and superior intellect, all those things allow you to be extremely wealthy like he was. And that's just survival of the fittest. His tough antics, his undercutting of his competitors was a reason for his immense fortune and wealth. There is an extra credit opportunity. This is not an enrichment assignment, but if you take a picture in front of the Standard Oil historic building, then I will give you a few extra points on today's assignment. Here's two cartoons describing the monopoly of Standard Oil. So look at this, think of what buildings are in this image. It's of a Standard Oil octopus, and this was created in 1904. But think about why an artist would create a picture of an octopus with its tentacles around different government buildings. And then here's another one, Rockefeller on his collar looking at government buildings. This cartoon is called What a Funny Little Government from 1900. And think about why someone would draw a cartoon where Rockefeller's holding a government building in his hand, in the palm of his hand. Right. Finally, you will have to do an assignment that goes through these different robber barons, which is under today's work. So Captain of Industries, you'll click on this. For part one, you just go through the different robber barons or Captain of Industries, and you pick whether they're a robber baron, Captain of Industry. The definition of a Captain of Industry is a leader who, through their fortune, they improve society. They are productive, they expand markets, provide jobs, act as a philanthropist with charity, so they better society. And then a robber baron is someone that takes advantage of others, is corrupt, questionable, unethical. They use their wealth for power and for selfish acts. So Captain of Industry, better society. Robber baron makes it worse. Read their descriptions and pick which ones you think they are. Then for part two, you'll go through and read each, decide whether you think it's a Captain of Industry or robber baron. For number three, look at this cartoon by a muckraker and then answer the questions. And then finally for part four, you'll read 4 different documents and answer a few questions as well. All right. That is all for today. I hope you had a good time listening and you learned a lot. If you have any questions, please ask, and I will see you guys later.